You could have the best core technical strategy. You could have the best experience. You could have the best CV on the planet. But if you don't believe in yourself, if you don't think you're going to be successful, if you don't show up correctly, you're never going to get that job. Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome to this week's edition of Life of a CISO with yours truly, Dr. Eric Cole. It is always a pleasure and honor to spend some time with you, and I always appreciate you carving some time out of your day to listen to the podcast. On this podcast, as you know, my main goal is to create world-class CISOs. I don't want you to be average. I don't want you to be good. Right? I want you to be world-class. Now, in order to do that, there's really two components that I need to focus on. One, I need to give you what you want, which is, how do you become a CISO? Focus directly on that CISO. How do you talk to executives? What are the common mistakes? What are the things to focus on? What are the core areas you want to address? But if we're really about world class, I also have to give you what you need. And what you need is a little bit of the mindset, is a little bit of the focus, is a little bit of those areas, because you could have the best core technical strategy. You could have the best experience. You could have the best CV on the planet. But if you don't believe in yourself, if you don't think you're going to be successful, if you don't show up correctly, you're never going to get that job. And that's something, I'll be honest with you, this is a morphous or awakening that I've recognized over the last 9 to 12 months as I've been doing more and more coaching with CISOs and people that want to become CISOs, is I'm realizing that on the strategy side, on the actual core CISO side, it's some pieces I need to put in, a couple puzzles, but we get through that pretty quick. But what's holding them back are usually things on mindset or others. For example, in one case, the individual wasn't being successful because he had some really bad eating and health habits, right, which I covered on our last one, so I won't delve too deep. And he was always sick, always missing work, and always in the hospital. Now, you could be the most brilliant person on the planet, but if you're missing multiple days of work, a week or a month, and you're out for a week or two because you're in the hospital, you're not going to be able to operate at your full capacity. You're not going to be able to operate at world-class level. The other one that I come across a lot more is what people say, right? It always amazes me. I had this several people, but the one in particular was the first one that I started getting this awakening that I need to be more than just the technical or the strategy side. And this was a very well-qualified candidate. She had amazing experience. She basically was, if you look at the strategy, experience, and all those components, pretty much textbook example of what you were looking for in terms of a CISO. But she was trying to get a job for over 6 months and just wasn't successful. She wasn't getting callbacks. She would get the initial interview, no callbacks, no offers, nothing else. And it was interesting because the first call I had with this person, and I said, tell me a little bit about yourself, the first words out of their mouth was, Eric, I don't know if I'm CISO material. I just, for 6 months, I've been trying to find a job, and I just don't think anyone's going to hire me as a CISO. And I just said, okay, stop, time out. I said, let's dissect that down. And this is sometimes hard to do, sometimes it's easy to do. But what I asked the person to do is I said, let's look at it from a third-party experience. This isn't you. What if we had a third person sitting here and they started telling you that they're not CISO material, no one's going to hire them as a CISO? What do you think their probability of success is going to be? Probably pretty close to zero, right? They might get lucky, right? But it's going to be close to zero. How do you think that person is going to show up to an interview? If they're the first things they say when they talk to a brand new person, because this was the first conversation I had with them, immediately when I say, tell me about yourself, the first words out of their mouth were, I'm not CISO material and no one will hire me as a CISO. How do you think that person is going to show up at an interview? Do you think when they're interviewing for a CISO, they're going to be confident, woohoo, ready to go? Or do you think they're going to be a little timid and basically going in knowing that they're not going to get hired? How you show up is super important, right? So just 2 simple phrases of your identity can basically dictate your future. And I'll prove it. Because I said, okay, why don't you think you're CISO material? And she said, well, I've never been a CISO before. I said, okay, that's easy. I said, let me ask you a question. Look at any profession, whether it's a CISO, whether it's a surgeon, whether it's a pilot. Every one of those folks that have experience now, do you realize there was a point in time when they didn't? Every CISO had their first CISO job. Every doctor had their first surgery. Every pilot had their first takeoff and landing. It had to be. So if we have this concept that because you've never done something, you never can become something, then this world would not have any innovation, and we'd have no doctors, no pilots, no CISOs, no nothing, because every one of them at some point in their career had no experience. So that's really not relevant to the discussion because everyone's going to have the first time. It's a guarantee. And so they got through. And then I said, okay, what's any other reasons? She goes, I really don't know if I have the experience or not. So I said, okay, let's do an exercise. Think about a CISO that you know, because you've met a lot of CISOs in the government and working in others. So think about a top-notch CISO, somebody who you think is one of the best CISOs, and tell me some of their characteristics. Let's go through it. So we started going through, well, they boom, 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 boom. I then said, okay, let's look at your CV. And we went through the CV, and 8 of the 10 items she listed, she had. I'm like, and the other 2 you can learn pretty quickly. So I'm like, okay, let's get this straight. Just because you've never done it before doesn't mean you don't have the skill set. And you basically do have the skill set. So is there anything else? And she's like, well, not really. I guess I never really thought about it. I'm like, okay, what do I need to do to convince you that you are CISO material and you have more than relevant CISO experience? And she sort of said, well, honestly, based on this conversation, I'm sort of there. I said, okay, so now I want you to practice. I want you to be very, very aware, get your family members, get your friends, get everyone involved. The first words out of your mouth is, I'm a world-class CISO, and companies are eager to offer me a position and hire me as their CISO. We'll come up with a version that works for you. But start going in and believing and building that confidence factor. And here's why I know it works. 6 months, applied to over 40 jobs, 35 of them interviewed, which shows she had a solid resume, and 0 offers. After that mindset shift, after she really got rid of the limiting belief and bought into an empowering truth where she honestly believed that she was that world-class CISO, within 2 months, she applied to 8 jobs, had 8 interviews, and had 5 job offers, and essentially got into a competitive bid where what the highest offer was initially, when she went back and said, listen, I'd like to work for you, but I have these other offers, and I'm really having trouble deciding, is this really the best offer? And just going back to each one of them, once again, careful, you don't want to overdo that. She ended up getting $120K more than the original offer. Her base was over $500K, and her total comp with bonuses was close to $1 million. This went from somebody who was working as an engineer because she didn't believe she was a CISO making $155K a year. That's almost, I mean, that's a 10K increase. You're adding a zero to that. That's pretty impressive of where you're going. But what's the more impressive or the scarier part, it was a couple millimeter distinction. It's not like I spent 3 years with her. It's not like she had to go in and study 40 hours a week. It was a 5-minute discussion with a 5-minute adjustment with a 60-second shift of what she does every day. So the really cool part and the good part and the part that excites me is you're closer than you think. You're much, much closer than you think to becoming a world-class CISO. You don't know how close you are, but the thing that's so scary and frustrating to me is, you know how many people give up on the 1-yard line? So many people just say, it's not going to happen for me. They give up and they never realize they're on the 1-yard line. And if they just 5 minutes, 5-minute adjustment, and they would have been in the end zone and scoring. So I just want to really encourage you that just look at your thoughts, look at your mindset. I'd be happy to work with you if that's the path you take, but you don't need me, right? You just listen to what you're saying or ask friends and family members. I will tell you, this is always a fun experiment, and it always shocks me. I go up to my friends and family members every month, and I'm like, okay, I'm just curious. What are things that I tend to repeat or say a lot that is a pattern that you notice? Or am I showing up positive or negative or this or that? And this was a couple of months ago. I didn't realize it, but I asked my friends and family members, I said, Eric, the last month, I'm not sure why, but we just noticed you were complaining a lot more than you normally do. Normally, you're always looking for the good. Everything's an opportunity and very optimistic. And this last month, it's just you've been very down, complaining and everything else. And I noticed that also correlated with some other things in my life that weren't going as well, so some other different factors. And it's like, that's interesting. I would have never seen or pick up on that, but external people can do a great job. So just ask. Just ask and focus, watch your words. But I just really want to encourage you. If you're not where you're at in life, that's a good thing, right? Because you always want more. You should never be where you want to be, right? There's always more to do. But you're probably closer than you think. You're probably a lot closer. So just start looking at your words, looking at your language, make some tweaks and adjustments. And like I said, you might be a lot closer to getting that dream CISO job and scoring a touchdown than you realize. You're probably not 50 or 60 yards away. You're probably 1 or 2 yards away from scoring. So now that we have that under control, I just felt compelled to share some of that. I want to get into the CISO piece in my second half and really want to do the 5 challenges. So I know this is something new where I usually just memorize everything, but I'm always trying new and want to improve. And so people said, hey, Eric, why don't you put a slide or 2 in there? So I'm going to try this format, see what you like. Post a message whether you like or don't like, just having a little guide along the way. But these are the 5 challenges that I find that many CISOs have. These are 5 challenges that hold CISOs back. These are things that if you could master and perfect, you can become world-class. So the first one is inability to communicate. Now, if you've been listening to my podcast, one of my strong beliefs, and I'll let you in on the secret of life, all problems are created and all problems are solved through proper communication. So if you're not getting invited to the meetings as a CISO, if your executives are not giving you time, if you're not invited to the board of director meetings and people aren't listening to you, it's because you are not communicating correctly. And the good news is, by increasing and doing proper communication, you can actually go in and start to fix this problem. Now, want to be careful, because this is the huge fallacy on why people struggle in this area. Communication is not talking. Let me say that again, because this is huge. When I say increase communication, I don't mean increase talking. Communication is a connection with another individual in which you listen and understand what they're saying, and you speak to address their issues or concerns. Communication starts with proper listening. Communication starts with understanding the other person and asking questions. And then communication finishes with talking and helping, explaining, or giving the other person what they want after you listened and after you understood what they're looking for. One of the things I'm always reminded of, and I have several CISOs I'm working with now, I go, listen, there's a reason you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? Use the ears twice as much as the mouth, right? You want to go in and really maximize that. I have a CISO now where I've been coaching him for a month now, and I know exactly the problem. I'm like, listen, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So how you're showing up on a coaching call, I know is how you're showing up at work, how you're showing up with your executives, how you're showing up with staff, and how you're showing up with your family. And this person is a lot like technical people, super smart, super brilliant, but he doesn't listen. He just likes to talk, right? And he just talks and talks, and he over talks people. When I try to say things, he just keeps on talking, even though he knows I need to go in. He doesn't stop talking. And while that isn't the worst part is he doesn't listen. I will ask him to do things, and this has been going on for a month, where I'm like, hey, I want you to go in and do X. And then the next call, he starts talking. I'm like, did you do X? And he's like, you didn't tell me to do X. And I'm like, I know I told you to do X. We actually, to the point now, we go back and listen to the recording of the previous calls where I specifically say you need to do X 5 times. And he's like, oh, I totally missed that. I'm like, yes, because you're so focused on talking and what you want to say next that you're not taking any time to listen or understand. And I'll tell you right now, my patience is much, much higher than that of executives or CEOs that you're going to work with. So if you're doing that to me, I know you're doing that to them, and they're not going to tolerate that. So if you want to be world-class CISO, you must be a world-class communicator. Now, I'll give you a couple of tricks to improve this. First, always let the other person talk first. Listen before you speak. But my general rule, and it's not hard and fast, but it's a good way to do it, is generally you want to be listening twice as much as you're speaking. So if the other person spoke for 60 seconds, you want to answer in 30 or 40 seconds. Now, this doesn't always hold true. I know you can always tell the technical people because they fight me on this. They're like, no, Eric. If I get asked a question, that could easily be 5 or 10 times because it's super technical. Who said so? Is that really a true statement? Just because it's a belief that you've established over the years, and it's very true with technical people, is the more you talk, the smarter you are. That's not a correct statement. I've been in boardrooms. The most brilliant people, the ones that command and control the room, are the ones that speak the least. But when they do, it's very articulate and very powerful. And the analogy I give is this. If you have to explain something in 5 minutes, that's sort of a watered down version. That sort of watered down version of it because it takes you 5 minutes and somebody has to listen for 5 minutes. That's a long time. What if you become so good at communication that you can compress and condense the same thing, but say it in 45 seconds? How much more powerful that is, right? When you're condensing things down and things are a lot more dense and concentrated, they're much more powerful. Right? So that's what you always want to think about. How can I say what I need to say in the least amount of words in the shortest period of time? So I gave you a couple things there. First, let the other person speak before you speak. Then try to always figure out how you can give the most condensed, power-punched version. Don't add a lot of extra water, right? Make it super strong, super condensed. Next one. Before you actually start speaking, ask 3 questions. So you let the other person start speaking, and then you say, okay, I just want to make sure I'm really understanding what you're asking for. So are you looking for an overall strategy for cybersecurity for the business? Are you looking for a number, like what the increase in budget needs to be? I just want to make sure I'm understanding what specifically you're looking for, and then let them talk again. Okay, so you're looking for a specific number. Is this to reduce the risk to a reasonable level, or is this really sort of you want top-notch, high-end security measure? I'm just winging this, but you get the point. So now I'm narrowing down what that CEO that I'm talking to really wants. Because if I didn't ask, even those were 2 questions. If I didn't ask those questions, I would be going broad. But notice, by asking questions, I can narrow down what they want and give a power punch condensed answer. And then finally, you want to make sure that you're really listening and following up. That's the big one I'll tell you with CEOs. If they ask you to do something or request that you do something and you don't follow up, that's a huge problem. Huge, huge problem. So on the communication side, I want you to start practicing. First thing I want you to do is just be aware. Just start being aware of how do you communicate with others. Do you speak first? If you have a conversation with somebody for 10 minutes, how much time did you speak versus the other person? How many questions did you ask? Did you really listen? Did you take notes? Did you understand what they were asking for? All of those things are really, really important. So just start raising awareness. What I actually do, and it's a constant thing because to me, communication is one of those skills it takes a lifetime to master. So I actually have my EA who's been with me for a while, tons of trust, and she knows that she can say anything to me because I want to learn and improve. I will actually have her with key critical calls. She will actually listen in and tell me all that. She'll come back after the call and say, okay, Eric, it was a 30-minute call. You spoke for 20 minutes. You asked no questions, or you spoke for 5 minutes. They were very receptive. Whenever you talked, everyone paid attention. And you only spoke for a tenth of the time, and you asked 7 questions to get clarification. Awesome. Right? She knows the formula that I'm looking for. So have a trusted person sit in the meetings with you. Have one of your staff provide that information. It's real simple. What is the total time of the meeting? Who spoke first? How much time did you speak versus the other person? How many questions did you ask? And how many notes or action items did you take? And I'll give you the final trick on communication. Take pen and paper notes. It's the weirdest thing. If I'm in a meeting and I have my cell phone out and I'm typing, people automatically think I'm texting or doing emails. Even if I tell them, listen, I take digital notes and I want to capture the key moments, people's general perception is that you are texting or emailing. If I have pen and paper and I'm taking pen and paper notes, there's zero doubt that I'm texting. There's zero doubt that I'm sending an email, right? I can't, it's paper and pen. So now they automatically think and recognize you are paying attention and taking notes. So once again, just giving you some data to help you really understand it. But this is one where it takes a lifetime to master, but start raising awareness. Start really paying attention. I will tell you, when I go in and sit in on a board of directors meetings or executives or others, the comments they always go is, Eric, you tend to speak the least, but when you open your mouth, everyone stops and pays attention because they know that you don't say a lot, but when you do, it's very articulate, very powerful, and very strong. Now, I'm not always that way, right? And I'm still learning and still improving, but that's what you want to get to. That's where you want to be world-class, because I'll tell you, number one issue that I get when I talk to CEOs about CISOs, the number one thing that comes up is, Eric, they just don't listen. They just want to come in the meeting, talk about things that are not important to me. My time is very important. I have very specific things that I want to cover, and they dominate the conversation, and then they never follow up with anything I say. So if you want to have a seat at the table, if you want to be respected, if you want to be a world-class CISO, master the art of communication. Now, the second complaint that I get after the communication from executives is they don't speak English. They don't know how to translate correctly. A world-class CISO is a translator. You're basically going to go in and you're going to translate between business and technical. Now, if you're going to be a translator, you have to be fluent in both languages. If you're fluent in only one language, you're not going to be a great translator, right? You have to be able to basically switch back and forth. I can sit there in a conversation and I can talk business. I can then switch to technical, but I am very comfortable in both. And when I'm in front of somebody, I get very clear on which language do I need to speak. If I'm in front of a business person, I only speak business. Because if I speak technical, they don't speak that language and they don't understand it. It would be like if I'm a translator and I speak German and English, and I'm in front of somebody who only speaks English and I start speaking German. It doesn't make any sense. They don't know that language. They don't understand the language. They're not going to be able to comprehend it. Yet, why do so many CISOs, when they're in front of business people, start talking technical? Why do they go in and start talking about firewalls and correlations and SIM and behavioral analytics? That's technical language, and the executives don't speak it. So the other big challenge is not knowing which audience you're in front of, not translating, and not speaking the appropriate language. And this one I get all the time from executives. They go, Eric, cybersecurity is one of our number one concerns. I wake up every morning and I look in the mirror and go, is today the day? Is today the day we have a major breach and potentially the company has to pay multi-million-dollar ransom, we have a huge lawsuit, or I lose my job? And executives think about that because it's the one thing they don't understand. Most executives, most CEOs know the competitive landscape. They understand and know that. They know economics. They know customers. They know marketing. They know profit and loss. Those things are all as unpredictable, but they understand and know them so they feel comfortable. Cybersecurity, they don't understand or know. And they're terrified because they don't. And then they call up their CISO to learn, and all that CISO does is speak a language they don't understand. Can you see the frustration from their part? Can you see why they don't invite you to meetings? Because they don't want you to show up in a meeting in front of people that only speak English, and you sit there and start speaking German the whole time. It's not effective, and it doesn't accomplish anything. So world-class CISOs are world-class translators. Figure out which area you're stronger and start improving. Now, most people that want to become a CISO are stronger on the technical side. They're stronger on the technical. So I always get asked, Eric, how do I get better on the business? And it's easy, immersion. They've done studies where they've taken somebody who doesn't speak a language at all, and they put them in that country, and within 6 months, they're fluent in that language, just because they're immersed and they pick up on it. So if you want to get stronger at business, if you want to be better at speaking business and translating to business, let me ask you a question. Who do you hang out with? Who do you talk with? What books do you read? If you're always reading technical books, if you're always hanging out with technical people, and you're always speaking technical, all you're doing is reinforcing the technical language and making it harder and harder to learn business. Why aren't you reading every night for 45 minutes business books? In the morning, when you get up, why don't you pick up a copy of the Wall Street Journal and read that over your morning coffee? Why don't you sign up for business courses? Why don't you go to lunch with other business executives? Why don't you go in and hang out with business people on the weekends? If you want to get better at something, you need to immerse yourself in it. So if you're very strong on the technical side and you want to get much, much better at the business, immerse yourself. Read, associate, and talk to those people, and you'll start to get better and better. Now, at this point, this is going to be a two-part series. So I went in and covered the first two challenges with CISOs, is the inability to communicate and not being able to translate. If you want to go in and learn the other three, make sure you tune in next week to Life of a CISO, where we're going to go in and give you all the tools and techniques you need to become world-class. Have an amazing, amazing week. Be awesome, and I'll see you next week.